I'm the hungry ghost. I've crawled inside your earbuds. I'm wiggling inside your brain like an earworm. Feed me memes about burning down the patriarchy and TikToks about the funny ways to insult men. Subscribe to Fem and Furious wherever you get your podcast, and stick around to feed the hungry ghost right after this. This episode is brought to you by Creative Alchemy. You know that creative project you've been thinking about? The podcast idea sitting in your notes app? The book you swear you're going to write someday? The brand, concept, or passion project that is just a little too big for you to handle alone? That is exactly what Creative Alchemy is for. Creative Alchemy is a creative consulting space that works one-to-one with storytellers, creatives, entrepreneurs, and multi-hyphenates to turn ideas into actual, tangible projects. If you have been dreaming about launching a podcast, writing a book, building a creative brand, or finally just bringing an idea to life, Creative Alchemy helps you move from inspiration to momentum. Using a blend of creative strategy, storytelling, astrology, hypnosis, and subconscious tools, Creative Alchemy helps you uncover your voice, move through blockages, and build projects that actually feel aligned and sustainable for your energy. To learn more, head to the show notes and book your free consultation today. All right, welcome back to another episode of Fem and Furious. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and if you haven't guessed already, we are talking about the season 1 finale of Margot's Got Money Troubles. This is your general spoiler warning. I am talking about probably stuff from the entirety of this season as we discuss its beautiful conclusion today. And we will also be looking ahead at some book stuff and season 2, what could be coming in season 2. So I will try to give some spoilers about the book stuff. I put them at the end of the episode so that if you have not read the book or you haven't read the book yet, you won't be spoiled on those things, but you really should. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. One of my favorites. And I can't wait for them to come back for season 2. I really loved this season of television. So this episode, the finale, is called Lock and Load. It is written by Eva Anderson and David E. Kelly, and it is directed by Dearbhalla Walsh. The vibe check. We are marching our way past mediations and court hearings to get to the very tasteful, creative, artful rendering of Margot's tunnel of love. The harrowing reality of everything that's happened this season is finally realized as Mark and Margot bring their custody battle to a conclusion. In the season finale of Margot's Got Money Troubles, we have a beautiful bow on top of the fan-favored trope of found family. And we get to see how all of these weird, quirky, flawed people show up relentlessly for Margot while also leaving plenty of runway for story in season 2. The feral factor is a 10 out of 10. I cried multiple times watching this episode. I watched this episode multiple times and cried multiple times each time I watched it. So I just personally think this is a wonderful episode of television. I think this was a really good season finale, a good conclusion to where we are. And I'm excited to pick up again in season 2. Who this episode is for? Anyone with a beating heart. Sorry, but I don't think that if you are somebody that says that you value compassion or empathy and then you watch this episode of television and you are not moved to tears, okay, maybe you don't have to be moved to tears, but if you're not moved by the story or compelled by the story, I simply just don't think that you value those things. This episode is also for single mothers or daughters of single mothers, raising my hand there because that would be me. And while I've never read it myself, and this is not me throwing shade at people who have read it, it's just that I have not read it yet. Anyone who loves, I suspect, Ice Planet Barbarians. Okay, all right, let us dive into the Slay by Slay, where we will explore key moments from this episode and their feminist themes, herstory, cultural context, and more. So the first big theme that I think comes out a lot in this episode is this concept of apologies. First, we have Cheyenne apologizing to Elizabeth. Let's talk about it. Elizabeth is a fucking coward, just like her goddamn son, because she's doing that crossword in pencil, and I think that she should be doing it in pen. Just saying. Do the crossword the way it's intended. Do it the way it's intended. Okay? Second of all, Cheyenne really fucked her up. Girly Pop's mouth is wired shut. And I'm just gonna say, Cheyenne knocked that girl out TKO style without breaking a fucking nail. And I think that that is the most impressive feat of all. The fact that you could punch somebody so hard that they would go down like a ton of rocks at the bottom of the ocean, and you did not break a nail while doing it, while simultaneously hitting somebody so hard that their mouth is wired shut. That's not a light punch. That's not a girly tap. Okay? That is formative to my viewing experience. Third of all, Elizabeth then says, in this conversation between her and Cheyenne, that she thought that Mark was going to win a Pulitzer Prize, which, first of all, Mark is peak mediocre man. There is nothing about this man that screams overachiever. I actually think he was overachieving by trying to maintain a relationship with his wife and also fucking Margot. I think the most ambitious he's ever been is probably when he's having sex with Margot, because he's like, wow, she's young and sprightly. Better step up my game. They seem to have had mind-blowing sex, which makes no sense to me, because nothing for nothing, but Mark just looks like he could get drunk off of vanilla extract. It is what it is. Elizabeth says that she's disappointed in Mark. She can't imagine how disappointed that Cheyenne is in Margot then. But the thing is that Cheyenne should be proud of Margot. And this concept of pride in one's choices comes up later in the episode with the judge, and we'll talk about it there. But I really do think that Cheyenne should feel proud of Margot. Not only did Margot have this baby, but she has done everything to ensure that Bodhi has a good life, that he is surrounded by love, that he has people around him who care for him, where Mark, on the other hand, got a student pregnant and then ghosted her. So let's talk about integrity and character, perhaps. But really, because character is who you are in the face of adversity, and in this really shitty circumstance of getting pregnant, maybe before you're ready, Margot decided that she wanted to have this baby, and she did everything that she could in order to make sure that this baby that she elected to have has the best life possible. Whereas when Mark is faced with adversity, he gets a student pregnant and has to potentially deal with the reality of that. He doesn't even end up having this conversation with Margot face to face. He uses his mom as a shield to get Margot to sign an NDA and ensure that this thing that he did is not going to be of dire circumstance for him or like affect his life in any real or major way. And even before it gets to that point, had completely ghosted Margot and let her deal with this on her own. Character is who you are in the face of adversity, and I think that we've seen these two people face adversity, and time again, I just feel that when Mark has to confront these really tough circumstances, it brings out the worst in him. So the fact that he decides to sue Margot, the fact that he even springs this custody case on her after everything, and how self-righteous he thinks he is, or maybe he doesn't even feel that way, but certainly allows himself to be manipulated by his mother and like act out his mother's will, because this whole custody case was driven by Elizabeth. As far as apologies goes, we also have Jinx showing up at the apartment to apologize to Susie, and this was so important to me. Susie is so protective of Bodhi. She opens the door, she sees that it's Jinx. He goes to interact with Jinx, and she literally blocks Jinx from Bodhi with her body and then puts Bodhi behind her in the little bassinet. She was like, no, you're not allowed to be here. You're not allowed to interact with him. And she holds that boundary really strong. She's also incredibly traumatized. She loves this man. She's idolized this man before she ever knew him personally. He was her favorite wrestler. And the fact that she then sees her idol strung out with nearly no pulse and almost killed Margot with a needle in his arm, like, this is so traumatizing for her. When people say, like, don't meet your heroes, and this is why, because you're going to find out that they're human. You're going to find out that they're a real person underneath whoever you have envisioned them to be. And this is one of those moments, and at the end of the day, Susie is so emotionally intelligent, and yet she's only 20. She's still just a 20-year-old girl, but I love that Jinx shows up and says, I don't have many friends, but I'm lucky to consider you one of them if you'll have me, if you'll accept my apology. So first of all, this is Jinx. He's been in rehab. He's worked the program surely before, which if you're unfamiliar with any sort of recovery program, making amends is one of the steps. Doesn't matter which program you're in. So here he is on the long list of people that he feels that he needs to apologize to. He even says, I've apologized to Margot. And like all people keep talking about is how I need to make it right with Margot. But I really feel in my heart of hearts, I need to make it right with you. And that's what I think is so profound about this conversation, that he, despite their age gap, despite their gender gap, that he is somebody who respects Susie and does consider her a friend. And I just think that this is such a check mark in the positive masculinity, the fact that he doesn't stick his nose up at what he has put Susie through on top of what he's put Margot through, and the fact that he realizes that this is something that he needs to also make amends for. And I'm really excited to see the healing of their relationship in season 2. I'm assuming that that will be one of the plot points that maybe we dive into next season as well. We then have KC, Rose, and Margo doing their little dance. I love this. I thought it was so cool. It's got that neon lights. We're getting like this super vibey, futuristic, very Aquarian effects. And also, we get this lovely dynamic between all of them. We've got Margo complaining and saying, like, all of this stuff is really expensive. I've got to pay for lawyers. Like, everything starts to add up. And the girls are so compassionate towards her. Both girls are like, hello, it's time to get your vagina on camera. She literally says the vagina is nature's piggy bank, which I thought is just such a funny line. And then Margo comes back and says, I don't do porn, I make art. And I love that Rose is like, your internalized horophobia is cute, but all sex work is art. This is maybe one of the richest parts of this episode to me. And something that I think is so tasteful and beautiful about this show. Not only is the show taking us, the audience, on a journey through our own misconceptions and biases about sex work, or being a single mother, or getting pregnant at 20, or being a drug addict. Insert whatever issue this show has discussed, and you could say the same thing. It is forcing us as an audience member to reconcile which things that are deemed bad by society are okay in our books, right? And why some things are more acceptable to us or palatable to us than others. So the fact that this show is taking us on this journey to understand our own relationship on our own biases about people who do sex work, and then you give us a character like Margot, who's incredibly charming and so easy to root for, you start to break through your own walls about your biases, about what that thing means. And I love that the show takes a definitive stance on this. I love that they say you're literally trying to sell someone a fantasy. And isn't that what any story is supposed to be doing? And that concept is lifted directly from the book. So at the end of the book, or towards the end of the book, there is this quote, and I'm going to read it. It says, because that's all art is in the end. One person trying to get another person they have never met to fall in love with them. So that's the point, to a certain degree, of what Margot's Got Money Troubles is trying to do, is make this beautiful art and make people fall in love with it, fall in love with these characters, fall in love with this story. And the fact that these two girls who are also sex workers, who we also like, we like Casey, we like Succulent Rose, we find them to be endearing, right? There's nothing about these characters who are, through the eyes of society, deemed less than. They are the heroes of our show. And yet the people that are out in society, like, Elizabeth Gable, who's got money and status and is quote unquote well kept. And we've got Mark, who's a professor and, comes from money and all these things. Like, they are seen as our antagonists across the season. And I just love that this whole conversation is about Margot having to confront her own biases and realize that sex work is only as shameful as she makes it. And I think when she has this conversation, it's what frees her up later on to then say to Cheyenne, I'm going to take this further. And I want to take it further. I'm inspired by this. There's something so beautiful about the way that this story, both in the book and in the show, humanizes these things that are considered illicit. It is a really beautiful story without any grit around it. A lot of times when we see these types of stories, we see women who are strung out, we see women who are trashy, right? These concepts of sex work as they show up in TV shows are usually not favorable towards women. So we have this show where the primary character is somebody who you want to see win, somebody who you want to see succeed, and also a sex worker. And it's like rewiring, I feel, the collective consciousness of media to say this is just a thing that people do. This is just a job. And I'm not saying it shouldn't talk about some of the other pieces of sex work, but I actually sort of enjoy the fact that this show is talking about OnlyFans and like normal people just do this from home. It doesn't have to be that big of a thing. Sometimes people just do it. How many content creators do you know that you follow that have an OnlyFans? I know many. And most of their content is not explicit or sexual in any way what they're posting online. And yet they also have an OnlyFans because they realize that there's a market for people like them who are content creators to just make a little extra money that way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also love that the girls are like, girly pop, if you need a mental health day, you can just go home. You've got a lot going on right now. You don't really need to sit here and do this if you're not in the mood to do this right now. I love that even though they are collaborators, even though they are all relying on each other at this point to build their platforms and to go further in their careers, that they're just like, babe, you got a big day tomorrow. You can just go home. Take a sick day. It's cool. And I love that. I love it about them so much. We then go into our last mediation. I loved this scene of Lace and Margot forehead to forehead growling at each other. Perfect. Chef's kiss. An image that will stick in my mind from this season for sure. But in this mediation, the psychological papers come back. They say that Margot is psychologically fit to maintain custody of Bodhi. Even then, Mark refuses to back down. He says that Bodhi needs an ethical home, which of course, Margot points out the hypocrisy of this, that he is somebody who fucked a student, that is not an ethical thing to do. And so again, the show is asking us to consider what we deem societally ethical, that these two societal transgressions, one where Margot is a sex worker and one where Mark has had an affair and slept with a student, that somehow sleeping with a student having an affair is more ethical than sex work. And again, the show is asking us to engage with how we feel about that. And then if it couldn't get any worse, this mediocre white man tells Margot that his wife and his kids were her victims, Margot's victims, as if he cannot take responsibility for any of his own actions. He says that he is the one that had everything to lose and that for Margot this was just a romp. When meanwhile, sorry that Mark got divorced, but Margot's the one who got pregnant, who had this baby alone, who is financially backed into a corner to start this OnlyFans page, forced out of school, and had her entire life and body rearranged in order to have Bodhi. And then, because I feel the show really wanted to piss me personally off, Mark then says he won't have his son raised by a pervert, which is, of course, perpetuating this disgusting, which is emphasizing and highlighting, though I would say not necessarily perpetuating, the right-wing ideology that sex workers are pedophiles. Tale as old as time. Right-wingers have used this across the board, right? And again, this experience of judging what is societally okay as far as like illicit goes. So somebody who does sex work, according to Mark, is somebody who is a pervert or a pedophile, whereas Mark is what? In his 40s? At least. And he's sleeping with a 20-year-old. And to be honest, Margo is 20 now, but she was 19 when they were sleeping together. The last time that they had sex, he was her freshman lit professor. So she was 18, turning 19 at the very least when he met her. So a grown man sleeping with a literal teenager. She would have been 19 when he was sleeping with her. And yet Margot's the pervert. And that's how easy it is for these stories to get flipped around and spewed in the media, despite the fact that there's something so much more insidious about what Mark has done. Now, Margot and Cheyenne then have a conversation inside of the soon-to-be spaceship. Margot tells Cheyenne, I've done the math. This pays for healthcare, childcare, rent, and I can do it from home. And honestly, even if you gave me the money to stop, I'm not sure I'd want to. I really loved this conversation between Margot and Cheyenne. And honestly, I really love what they've done with Cheyenne's character, because in the book, I would say that Cheyenne acts as a major mirror to Margot, which she does in the show as well. But by the time we get to this episode and this scene, there's just something about her character that is so rich and so much more developed than it was in the book. And clearly the vision that they have, or the message that they want to put out about this relationship between Margot and Cheyenne, is just different than what they wanted to do in the book. And I think that that's a good adaptive choice, especially when you have Michelle Pfiffer playing Cheyenne. Like, it's a no-brainer to give her more room to work with within the story. So I love that Margot tells her, like, I don't really want to stop. This isn't a necessity anymore. It's a benefit to me in multiple reasons, not just financially, but creatively. Margot is somebody who is innately creative. We see it from the very first episode where she's playing with the wrestling figurines, and she's telling us that she's always dreamed about these fantasy worlds and these aliens, and she's telling us from the very get-go that she's somebody that's creative, which is why she was in school for creative writing. So the fact that she has met these other creatives, she's getting to not only make friends, make money, be at home with her son, but stretch her creative potential, is so brilliant to me. Margot then has this beautiful conversation with her after this where she says, I basically learned to love my body from you. I learned from you, from walking in on you when you were naked, that there's no reason to feel shame about this. She even says that Cheyenne claimed that she had the best vagina on the planet. And even though Cheyenne is uncomfortable with what Margot is doing, maybe this isn't what she envisioned Margot doing, but Margot's internalized sense of self-worth and pride for her sex work and her sex appeal comes from Cheyenne. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing, that Margot is trying to work out her horophobia by sharing this moment with Cheyenne and basically being like, you told me that this was your splendor and that there's something mystical, magical, elevated about the way that Cheyenne had taught her, unintentionally perhaps, to love her body and to not be ashamed that this is who she is. Margot is so good at holding up the mirror and being like, these things that you don't like about you or that you're uncomfortable with are actually things that are derived from you. And she does this a couple of times, because she does it with Jinx too, where she's like, hey, my mom worked at Hooters and my dad was a pro wrestler. So like, tell me, what am I supposed to be outside of somebody who is creative and fun and alternative, like somebody who's going to go outside of the box? And I think that this works really well for her character. She's somebody who's not going to judge other people and therefore is not cruel or petty to other people, because she can see herself in them and she is so connected to her sense of empathy and compassion for other people that it allows her to say these things, often with grace, sometimes with a little bit of spiciness to them. But I love this moment with her where she's like, hey, this thing that maybe you think is shameful is actually something that you taught me is beautiful and not shameful. And I love that. So she then goes, I think this is one of the most touching scenes of this episode where Margot then goes from laughing to crying. I'm getting choked up just talking about it. This moment hits so hard. It is such a beautiful depiction of a silver lining. And the way that she squeaks out, Mama, I'm scared. The way that she calls for her mom and the way that Cheyenne finally is so nurturing and loving and not dismissive to her in this moment. This is the scariest moment of Margot's life. This job that she has taken on of being somebody's mother is something that is so foundational to her at this point, has become so interwoven into her identity. This love that she has for Bodhi, this desire that she had before Bodhi was even really cooked up in there. She was like, I don't know much, but I do know that I want to have this baby. And this beautiful silver lining of like, things will be okay. We are laughing and there's things to always bring us joy and happiness in this world, even in the saddest, scariest, most fearful moments that we are in. And I love any TV show, book, movie experience in media where they can emphasize those silver linings. This is so true. And I think about this all the time. Like how many times I've gone to a wake or a Shiva and you are just laughing with people over these shared experiences and celebrating somebody's life, and can also be in the pits of mourning because you have lost somebody you love, and how those two things like bleed together in these moments. And so the fact that she's sitting here in her spaceship, thinking about her future and ready to move on with her life, and also that there's stuff to laugh about and stuff to reflect on. And also, it's the scariest thing that she will ever do is go and face Mark in court and potentially lose her son. I love this moment so much, and I just thought it was so touching and so beautiful. And I thought Elle Fanning was phenomenal in this scene. And again, this is something from this season that like will be snapshotted in my mind because I just thought this moment was so beautiful, particularly the Mama, I'm scared. That hit me in the fucking gut. You can tell if you're listening, I'm getting all choked up. Such a beautiful moment. And I'm really, really glad that this was in there. We don't get anything like this in the book from Margot and Cheyenne, not like this. So to have this moment where these two finally connect in this way over Bodhi, to me was just so meaningful and a really wonderful addition into the show. Earlier in mediation, Mark calls Margot out for having a shit village, but so many people fucking show up for Margot. We have Lace, we've got Jinx, Cheyenne, Susie, Kenny, KC, Rose. Meanwhile, all Mark has is his insufferable, cold parents. And this is, again, the thing that I have been talking about the entirety of the season is the idea and the concept of it takes a village to raise a child. And yet this odd group of people that Margot has found herself surrounded by, these incredibly flawed people that Margot has chosen as her village, are also people who are so filled to the brim with love and support for her that they all show up. The effort that every single person puts into being there. Jinx is all dressed up. Cheyenne gets the outfits for Margot and for Bodhi. We've got Susie all dressed up. Like Casey and Rose are all dressed up. It's a testament to who Margot is. Margot is somebody who has built these incredible relationships with these people who would otherwise be overlooked in society. And she has pulled these people in and given them a home in her heart as much as they have to her. And so this sense of village and community that have rallied around this one person and her son shows you exactly who Margot is. And I just really love that. We have Lace and Cheyenne in the bathroom, where we get the title of this episode, Lock and Load. And Lace is the ultimate girl's girl and not letting Cheyenne take responsibility for other people's actions. And basically is asking Cheyenne in this moment to confront her own internalized shame about the choices that she's made, about having Margo, about having Margo with Jinx, you know, somebody who is a drug addict and wasn't around, and the fact that this then put them in this situation later on for Jinx to relapse and for Margo to have a baby and all of these things. And that's Cheyenne's own internalized shame about her choices, right? Lace is like, I've met a lot of people who need to take accountability for their actions and have things to apologize for, but you're not one of them. And so she's telling her, like, the things that you have done are not shameful. You were in love with a man. You had a baby with him. Wasn't the ideal situation, but okay. You had a kid. Wasn't an ideal situation, but look at what you've done. Okay, Margot had a baby. It wasn't an ideal situation. Okay, Jinx relapsed. Not an ideal situation. But like, none of those things are innately your fault. So you don't need to apologize for them. And the fact that she lets Cheyenne off the hook for her own guilt and shame about everything that has unfolded, I think is just such a great moment in this finale. And I really loved the two of them together. This lock in, you know, again, forehead to forehead, like go out there and let's get them. So wonderful. The judge then enters. Not gonna lie, every single time I've watched this episode, I'm like, did this man do a line of cocaine before he came out here? I'm not sure why he needs to be top tier neurotic. I'm just not. But do I love that he immediately goes after Mark and says that, like, this whole situation reeks and it smells like you're the problem here? And Mark is like, yeah, I take responsibility for that. And he's like, and yet you're asking Margot to pay the price for your actions. Do I love that? Fuck yeah, I do. Right then and there, when he says that to Mark, you just get this sense and this feeling that even though on paper this situation with Margot does not fucking look good, that as crazy as this fucking judge is, somebody is on her side and is going to be fair and honest about what needs to unfold in this courtroom. He's not any less harsh with Margot. He's like, are you proud of all of this? Is this what you're proud of? And Margot then kind of goes on a rant. She's like, well, I don't think anyone's proud. She kind of says the thing that she feels that she's expected to do, as many women do when they contort themselves into little tiny boxes that they feel are digestible for other people. And he pries and he's like, do you think that's a good answer? And she goes then on this tangent where she says, just because people find what I do to be distasteful, it doesn't make it illegal, which is true, or wrong, which is also true, or disqualify me from being his parent. My answer, yeah, I'm proud. And she's just gone on this tangent of how she's given her baby a lot of love, that he's got the love of his grandparents, that he's fed and well kept, and that this is just a job, like any other job. Sorry, but it's not the most ideal, and yet it's the thing that allows me to afford this life with my baby. He kind of questions Jinx, and he's like, you like breaking people's hands? Jinx is like, nope, just that guy. He talks to Cheyenne. He's like, you like breaking jaws? She's like, no, just that girl. And this is when you're like, ugh, okay, maybe it's a little tense for this court situation. And yet then he goes to Elizabeth and he's like, okay, well, what did you say that caused her to punch you in the face? And Elizabeth's like, I don't really recall. He's like, you don't recall? You got your fucking mouth wired shut for it, so you should probably recall. She tries to give like a hoity-toity answer, and he's like, you called her snatty ratty, is that right? So I don't know if that was listed on a police report that ended up going into evidence to him or some sort, but he knew that Elizabeth called her snatty ratty and provoked Cheyenne into hitting her. And so again, we get in this moment that this judge, crazy as he may be, on uppers may he be, is going to be fair to Margo. He then has Susie come in and hand Bodhi over to each and every member of the village, and you can just see that he's so loved. You can see that everybody here is comfortable with him. I love the moment between Jinx and Cheyenne where Jinx is bouncing him and kind of bouncing him to Cheyenne, who holds him for the first time, and he doesn't cry, and she starts crying, and Margo starts crying, and I started crying. And the judge is like, what's going on? Why are y'all crying? And she's just like, hey, Fever, but we know that this is the first time that Bodhi has really taken to Cheyenne. And I honestly really feel like the scene earlier where Margo says to her, Mama, I'm scared, and she lays on her lap and she's crying and Cheyenne is really consoling her. This is Cheyenne stepping into her experience of motherhood. She really breaks that wall down for herself at that point, and I honestly feel that that is what allows her to do this in this moment, to hold Bodhi in this way, even with Jinx there to coach her kind of into it. Over the course of these past couple of episodes, Cheyenne has gotten in touch with a side of her that is nurturing and maternal that sort of peaks and culminates in this conversation that she has with Margo about her splendor and the OnlyFans and this fear that Margo has of losing Bodhi. And I really feel that that's what allows her in this moment to really be able to accept Bodhi in, and for Bodhi to finally pick up on the cues that she has this in her, that she's got this parental, maternal, nurturing streak in her, and that's why he doesn't cry. We then have Susie bringing Bodhi over to Mark, who immediately starts crying, and then Mark starts crying. And when the judge is like, now why are you crying? He's like, this is the first time I've gotten to hold my son. And what really fucking irked me about this is that Margo didn't cut him out of the picture. He cut Margo out of his life. Margo would have 100% let Mark be there had he chosen to, in whatever capacity that he wanted to. The thing that makes this so deplorable is the fact that he forced her out of school, made her sign an NDA, had ghosted her way before he did that, pays her off, like all of these things. He is the one that has pushed Margo out of the picture. Margo is a reasonable person. We've seen her push to many limits, and we see that she's got a temper, and we see that she does not handle frustration very well. And yet she is somebody who time and time again has offered grace to people. And so if Mark would have said, hey, this is the type of relationship that I would like to have with Bodhi, it's the fact that he drags her through court, slanders her, attacks her reputation, attacks her morality, attacks her ethics, attacks her as a mother, and continues to try to demoralize her again and again through this entire mediation and then court case, and then cries like he has been kept from his son when that's not the case, really fucking annoyed me. But, of course, Mark is just a mediocre man. Whether he's really moved or these are just kind of crocodile tears that he's putting on to affect the judge to get what he wants, I'm not really sure. But we have Margo winning the case. Primary custody goes to the mother. And then Mark says to Margo, I'm actually a really good father, which I think is really potentially true. And I love that even in this moment, even after everything that Mark has done to her, when the judge asks, would you deem that he's dangerous or unfit or anything like that? She's like, I would just deem him a stranger. She doesn't go low when Mark goes low. She chooses to be honest and really be thinking about Bodhi here. And the fact that she's like, I want you to know Bodhi now. I don't want you to know him later, because she has had this experience where her father wasn't in her life for many, many years. And now her father is, and she has this incredible, beautiful relationship with him. She doesn't want to keep Bodhi from Mark. She just doesn't want Mark to keep Bodhi from her. And she's not an unreasonable person. If Mark would have just come to her and said, hey, I know you signed an NDA, but I want to have a relationship with my son, that would have been fine. She would have been open to that. It's the fact that he tries to take Bodhi away from her and slander her good name and good pussy that he hit multiple times, okay, is what I think is so frustrating about the situation. But I love that Margot just has all this compassion. Margot is one of the most compassionate people that I think we've ever seen on TV. Tell me if I'm wrong. Susie then tells Casey and Rose, she's like, you guys look hot in this little getup. And they're kind of like, you look hot. So walk with me down theory corner for a second. I'm wondering if they are going to expand Susie's role to be part of the sex work next season. I don't know, just something to consider. Felt like maybe we were pulling Susie into this world with us a little bit. And honestly, I am down for it. I love Susie. I hope there's more Susie. I can't get enough of her. More Susie, season 2. At the very end of this episode, Mark comes over to Margot and says, hey, by the way, I did not call CPS on you. And this is where we find out that Kenny called CPS. Now, last week, if you listen to the end of the episode where we were talking about spoilers for this week's episode, I said, hey, in the book, we find out that Kenny and Cheyenne are the ones that have called CPS on. So it's clear to us by the end of this episode that Cheyenne didn't know that Kenny had done this. And one of the things that I had theorized last week was like, is Kenny going to do this because he's jealous about the relationship that Cheyenne has with Jinx? And it seems that that is the case. Now, again, this is an expansion or an adaptive choice from the book, but I think that this is a great one. I think it's giving us more Kenny next season, and it's giving us a lot to deal with in season 2. So knowing that we are going into a season 2, we have the following things. Number 1, we have to reconcile with the fact that she may still lose Bodhi. She's gained custody, but she's still got CPS to deal with. And that is a huge part of the book as well. So we still have that to contend with next season. We are also going to have to see how Cheyenne deals with what Kenny has done and how Margot will respond to Cheyenne and Kenny after this is over. But yeah, Kenny has seemingly done this because he's jealous boy number 1. Sorry, I thought that jealousy was a sin, Christ boy. He says that no one was holding Jinx accountable. But truly, I just feel like, once again, who are we to judge? What type of accountability is there for an addict? Is it to seek help? If that's the case, Jinx immediately upon being released from the hospital signs into a methadone clinic and gets in a program. Jinx apologizes to everyone around him. He is racked with guilt. We see it multiple times. So what kind of accountability is there? And why should Jinx being held accountable for his drug addiction cost Margot her baby? So once again, Margot being forced to potentially pay the price over Kenny's jealousy and Jinx's addiction, none of those things have to do with her as a parent or her ability to care for her son. And Kenny even takes it a step further to say, like, Cheyenne wasn't going to report Margot, but what was there to report? What was there to report? Margot did not put her baby in danger. Susie was home with the baby. I know that Jinx was there too and that he got high while the baby was there. I'm not saying that's good looks, but he locked himself in a bathroom and he removed himself away from his family as much as he possibly could in this situation. And I think what a lot of people really misconstrue as far as addiction goes is the fact that this is a disease. This is something that somebody is sick with. You would not say to somebody who has cancer and is terminally ill, like, I'm going to hold you accountable for the fact that you don't feel good. This is a disease. It's something that somebody cannot help. And because we, as people who do not have addiction problems, engage with drugs or alcohol or porn or sex or whatever somebody might be addicted to, because we don't interact with those things in an unhealthy way, we think that there's control around these things when in fact somebody who is an addict is unwell, can't control it. There is no thinking or controlling your way out of an addictive habit. There is just getting help and literally taking it one day at a time. That's why it's the slogan. Do I think that it was right of Jinx or fair of Jinx to put Margot in a precarious situation? No. Do I think this was traumatizing for everybody involved? Yes. But do I think that there is a level of accountability that should go into this? I think Jinx has taken accountability. He's not somebody who's shying away from the fact that he's an addict or that he needs help. He immediately says, I relapsed. Within 24 hours of being released from the hospital, signs into a methadone clinic, moves out of the apartment, and starts making amends. I mean, I don't know what else he could do as far as takes accountability goes. And I would love to know what that looks like for Kenny. I would love to hear what accountability would look like in this situation and why he feels that no one is holding Jinx accountable when Jinx was literally kicked out of his home and forced to move and signed up for a methadone clinic. Like, he is in treatment. So I don't know what kind of accountability he is looking for. And I think this is this line of judgment that people put onto addicts. And that Kenny, as a Christian man with God in his heart, should be able to find compassion and empathy for this person who is suffering and struggling. Nobody's hurting more than the addict. Sorry, I'm not saying that it's not painful for people around them or traumatizing for people around them, but nobody is hurting more in that moment than Jinx. Nobody's feeling more shame, more guilt, more frustration in himself, more self-loathing. I mean, he's somebody who takes this very seriously, clearly. So I think that there is going to have to be a reckoning of what that means. What does he mean when he wants somebody to take accountability for this relapse that this person has had? And when inevitably CPS starts to put pressure onto Margot, especially now that Jinx has failed this drug test, this urine test that they have asked for, what kind of accountability is going to be placed onto Kenny for putting Margot in such an awful situation, perhaps even worse than a custody battle with Mark? Because now this isn't just about her and Mark trying to figure out their co-parenting relationship. This could be the state taking her child away and her having zero control over that. So we will see next season. All right, let's look at some fangirl footnotes, some honorable mentions. The first is, besides the fact that Sun Chips is clearly sponsoring the show, the Sun Chips have evolved in their meaning and the way that they have been depicted over the show. So at first, we got them as a part of like Orange Meal, which is what her and Becca are talking about in the beginning of the season, which is sort of like sad girl dinner. Then they became part of this Hungry Ghost launch video where she goes into the house with Casey and Rose and they're eating Sun Chips and she takes one, she eats it, and then she vomits. And then we get Sun Chips twice in this episode. Once with the bike running over it in the very beginning before they go into Lace's office. And then later, before they head into court, we see a Sun Chips bag getting picked up by a litter picker. And to me, both of these were sort of like, there's no room for sadness anymore. This is not sad girl. We're not dwelling on this. Like, we're here for action. We're here to crush it. Maybe they just needed a certain amount of placements and they figured this was the best way to do it. It's also worth noting that I think the Sun Chips are tied to, in some way, the concept of the Hungry Ghost, like this Buddhist concept of the Hungry Ghost. There's a quote from the book where she's kind of going on and on. She's like, I never really got the Hungry Ghost thing. How could a ghost be hungry? And she says, it made perfect sense to me now. The longing for food you could no longer eat. The memory of having a body. People were constantly giving ghosts food. Offerings of persimmons and oranges. Pan de muerto on the Day of the Dead. Even Halloween was about nothing so much as the candy. What the dead wanted above all else was to eat, to cram their mouths full, to feel the calories flood their bloodstreams, to be part of it again. Life. Bloody, squirming, pulsing, hungry life. And then, towards the very end of the book, she kind of goes on to complete this thought where she says, I had always thought that love was supposed to come from other people, and somehow I was failing to catch the crumbs of it, failing to eat them, and I went around belly empty and desperate. I didn't know the love was supposed to come from within me, and that as long as I loved others, the strength and warmth of that love would fill me, make me strong. So this concept of the hungry ghost is tied to the consumption of love and life, and the fact that these sunships are tied to the hungry ghost, this like Buddhist concept, I think is really fascinating, and that we get to see it there. So we also have in this episode Jinx laying on Cheyenne's couch. I know we've seen it before, but the way that it was like particularly filmed with Jinx laying there in this way is the pink couch from the book. So I loved that shot. And then something I only noticed in this episode is that Margot has a mini star tattooed on the inside of her left ear, and Jinx has a star tattooed on the right side of his neck. So I don't know if those are meant to be complementary, but it felt like there was something special about that in this episode. Like there was a highlight on both of those tattoos over the course of the episode. And then at the very end of this episode, we finally get a nod to JB at the very end. Thank God. I was nervous they weren't going to touch on this. I was like so upset about it when we were like getting into the nitty gritty of the season. I was like, how come we haven't heard from JB? I understand now it's because they were planning this for season 2. If you don't know, you don't know. But if you know, you know. So read the book. It's not really a spoiler because we see that JB tips her $100, then $500, then $750. So the fact that we see something about JB, if you want to know and go deeper, read the book. If you're just like, hey, I'll wait till season 2, cool. But we know that JB will be here and I'm very excited for it next season. Can't wait. So that's a part of our runway for next season as well, this story that we're going to get with JB. All right, let's crack open the burn book where we will look at the superlatives for this episode. The Bold and Bothered Award. This award is strictly for the femme and the furious. It's the quote or the moment that relays the most feminine rage. And it goes to Margo, who says to Mark, "What are you so afraid of, Mark? That Bodhi should grow up to be like me? What if he should grow up to be like you? A coward." Hit pause on my TV when that came up. I was like, if I was Mark, I would literally be sweating through my suit. She's so good in this role. I love Elle Fanning so much. The Shiro Award goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring or the moment that is the most empowering. And it goes to Susie cosplaying like a little professional girly pop when the psychologist comes. She's in this very long skirt, very long blazer. Like none of it looks tailored or fit to her. But to me, this is like Susie cosplaying what she thinks, quote unquote, that this psychologist would want to see. The Femme Fatale Award, for the most smash the patriarchy moment of the episode. And it goes to Cheyenne, who in the beginning of this episode says, "Yes, Kenny, kind of the same as when Ice shows up. They just want to, confirm the hunky-dory of it all." Fuck yeah, Cheyenne. I love that this show brought Ice into it. I love that they're taking this political stance. I love that this show that is so liberal and so open-minded about sex work and drug addiction and all of these different things about being a young mother and a single mother, all of these things that society deems like so bad, and goes and says the thing that is true, which is like, yeah, Ice shows up and tries to make it seem like they're doing a good thing when they're not. And she's comparing Ice to CPS. And so I love that the show is criticizing not just Ice directly, but also these patriarchal systems that do not favor anybody who is considered different. So for Ice, that would be any sort of minority. And for CPS, it is a mother like Cheyenne or a mother like Margot. So I really love that line. Speak Your Truth Trophy, the best quote or line. It goes to Cheyenne, who says, "The splendor of your poon," which I just thought was so funny. And then honorary heartthrob, because I'm just a girl, okay? And I want to talk about the most swoon-worthy moments. And it goes to, you guessed it, Jinx doing his little workout scene. Shut the fuck up. Sex on legs, baby. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Femme and Furious. Thank you for being patient with me. I know I've been twisting things around, but I'm sorry. I originally said I was going to release this over the weekend, but I was looking at our schedule and I still have one more slot to fill for Euphoria coverage since I'm no longer doing that. And so this is coming out today, Tuesday. Hi, hello. On Friday, we are doing Off Campus episodes 5 and 6. And then we'll be back next Tuesday to close up Off Campus series with episodes 7 and 8. And that will be the Euphoria season finale. And then we won't have to worry about figuring out where things need to go from here on out. So thank you all so much for being patient with me as I've worked this around in real time. I love you all. And until we get to season 2, go work on your internalized horophobia.